Hello friends, in this video lecture, we will try to understand the basic things behind the number theory and asymmetric cryptography that are known as hash function, authentication, DSS and integrity. So basically, asymmetric cryptography and the related terms regarding them are nothing but integrity, authentication, DSS stand for digital signature standard, and hash function. These all things are depend on the cryptography, types of cryptography and number of keys used in the cryptography. So we have to take a short review on all these things. So basically, what is cryptography? Cryptography comes from the Greek word that means crypt means hidden and graphy means writing. So hidden writing or secret writing is known as cryptography. We can use this particular term for the secure communication over the transmission. So if I want to send a message to you, then my message will be the clear message or the plain message. So input is always the clear or the plain text which can be easily understandable by the receiver. And whenever I will try to send a message to you, it is possible that somebody else will try to observe it, and hence such kind of unauthorized person are known as the attackers. So it is necessary to convert a message into the encoded format. So that encoded format is known as the ciphertext. So when suppose A will try to send a message to P, then that particular input or the message is known as the plain text, and it will be transmitted with the help of the process of encryption, and after that the encoded output is known as the ciphertext. And so that the hackers or the unauthorized user are not able to understand what kind of exact message conversation is happen in between the sender and the receiver. That must be the authorized sender and authorized receiver. So for that purpose, the cryptography play an important role. Why? Because this conversion into the ciphertext is known as what? Secret writing. So here we are able to convert our message, original message, into the other form. So encoded form is known as the secret writing. For example, I am going. Suppose this is the input message, that means the plain message, and here the secret writing of this message, that means after the encryption the message will be APQ, SRT, TUW, like that, random numbers. So you are not able to understand, that means unauthorized person not able to understand the meaning of this particular secret writing. Whenever the authorized receiver will get this particular message, that will get APQ, SRT, UW, then that receiver will try to decrypt it, and that after the decryption the receiver will able to achieve I am going. So this is the encryption and this is nothing but what? Decryption. So such kind of transmission of the message can occur over the secure communication, and hence the term cryptography arises. So in that particular term, again we require to observe some meaningful statements that are nothing but what? The use of private key and the use of public key. So the use of private key, that means an individual having that particular key. So the authorized persons are having the private key. Same key is used for the encryption and decryption. The process is known as symmetric key algorithm. When different keys are used for the encryption and decryption, the process is known as asymmetric key cryptography or algorithm. In the asymmetric key cryptography, the private key can be only used by the receiver for the purpose of decryption. in the symmetric key cryptography, the private key is used by sender as well as receiver. They will exchange the key for the encryption and decryption process. But in the asymmetric key cryptography, private key is used by the receiver for the purpose of decryption, and public key can be used by both the sender as well as receiver. So in the asymmetric key cryptography, private and public, both the keys are going to be used, while in the symmetric key, only one key, that means the same key, is get exchanged in between the sender and receiver, and that is nothing but what? Private key. So this is the basic idea behind the cryptography. So that same things I try to written over here. Cryptography involves creating written or generated codes that allow the information to be kept secret. Cryptography converts the data into the format that is unreadable for the unauthorized user, allowing to transmit it without unauthorized entities decoding it back into the readable format, thus the compromising the data. Unreadable format means this, that means they cannot understand the meaning, and it is very difficult to decode, that means decrypt the data into the readable, that means understandable format, because no one can imagine the meaning of this A, P, Q, S, R, T, U, W can be the I am going. So this is nothing but what? The secret writing, and it is useful to prevent our message from the unauthorized user. So here, the process of conversion of ciphertext to plain text is known as decryption, while the process of conversion of plain text to ciphertext is known as encryption. So, plain text, that is our input, to cipher, that means the encoded output, is nothing but encryption. And from ciphertext to plain text, that is known as decryption. So, in the process of this encryption and decryption, one much more important term arises, that is nothing but authentication. So, what it means by authentication? Authorized persons should get identified, and this is nothing but what? Authentication of the data, authentication of the person. So this is the sender, this is the receiver. Suppose I try to be receiver at the same time. That means suppose A is the sender, B is the receiver, but in the process of sending and receiving some data, suppose C also entered. Then C is unauthorized user, no doubt. But if in some cases C pretend to like a B, that means if the profile of C is same as that of profile of B, indirectly fake profile, if C try to generate, then A may understand that C is nothing but what? B, and A will try to transmit the message to B. Actually for A, B is the authorized receiver, but this is not the authorized receiver. Why? Because this is a fake profile and which is generated by C. So actually A try to transmit the data to C, that means to unauthorized user, not to exactly the authorized user. This B is nothing but what? Authorized receiver. So here authentication plays an important role. That means identification. You have to identify who is the correct user and who is to try to be pretend like a correct user. So this authentication can be done with the help of various techniques, and hence that try to improve the security of the transmission of the message. Once your receiver is get confirmed, then it is better to transmit a message so that that will reach towards the authorized person. So this is nothing but what? Authentication of sender and receiver. Second is authentication of message. For example, again, if A try to send to B, meet me at 8 a.m. to B, and hacker C try to change or modify that message, meet me at 10 a.m. and then that message is transmitted to B. There is a change in the time. That means there is a modification in the message, and because of which the miscommunication can be occurred in between A and B. So here we require to authenticate the message or the data, whether the data is get modified or not. And for that purpose, the process of encryption and decryption plays an important role. What is meant by decryption? After decrypt that message, you are getting exactly same message that is of original message, and this is not the original message. The original message is this. So the number of bits can be changed. For writing down the 8, suppose I am going to use the 1 bit. Writing down the 10, I am going to use the 2 bits. So the number of bits in the plain text and ciphertext are going to change. So if such kind of change in the text can get observed by the receiver or the sender, then you can authenticate that message. That means you can verify, you can identify the message, whether the message is correct or not. So authentication of receiver is also play an important role. Similarly, authentication of message is also play an important role. So verification, identification, that means authentication. The next one is integrity. So the term integrity is ensuring the accuracy and authenticity of the data. So the accuracy, that means the transmitted message is correct or not. Then authenticity of the data, that means whatever data comes from the plain text and converted into ciphertext, and again from ciphertext to plain text, is correct or not. That percentage, amount of percentage is nothing but what? Efficiency. That means what? Integrity. Only the authorized person may edit the data. Yes, we can change the number of bits in the plain or the ciphertext conversion, but who is able to modify the data? The authorized person. And they need to follow the procedure to prevent it. Why? Because if A is the sender, B is the receiver, again if C is the receiver, there can be the multiple sender or can be the multiple receiver. So who are able to modify the data? The authorized sender and receiver. If B is also one of the sender, B try to send something. Okay, so here we can take P. P is also the one another sender. P try to send something to B. Similarly, P can send something to C. So they are able to modify the message. But they have to follow the protocols. Protocols means what? Rules and regulations which are assigned for the good communication. So what kind of protocols they have to follow, or why they require to follow the protocol? Because instead of these two authorized person at sender side and at receiver side, suppose there is some unauthorized user or the party who will try to modify the message, then C or B, that means receiver, may assume that the modification in the message can be done by the A and P. But actually it's not correct. Why? Because the unauthorized person tried to modify the data. And so that if sender required to modify the data, they have to follow the procedure, so that there may be possibility that receiver may get idea that senders try to modify the data. Authorized senders especially try to modify the data, and they will be aware, so that after the decryption or after they will receive some data, they will try to verify whether the transmitted data is correct or not, or get modified or not. So such kind of integrity procedure are again useful when you require to modify the message. Not necessary that always attacker will try to modify the message. Sometimes sender also required to modify the message. But yes, if they are required to modify, they have to follow the procedure, so that receiver will be aware about the modification and the verification of the message. And in this way, we can enhance the security of the transmission. Then the next one is digital signature standard. This is also known as DSS, or indirectly we can say that it is digital signature. These are the special type of data safety maintenance where a special kind of signature is required to access some particular information. The signature can be in the form of QR code, and that must be properly read so as to access the data. Now, here I will try to give you a simple example or the application of this particular thing, because many times we require to provide our identity in the form of the signature. So while filling any form online, it is required to write or it is required to do our signature, and that cannot be used by the other unauthorized hackers. That can be used only for that particular page or only with that particular work. So in this particular case, we required much more security, because that is nothing but what? Our signature, which can be used by the hackers, and that will be much more dangerous for us. So sometimes such kind of applications required a huge amount of security, and that can be provided with the help of cryptography. We can also discuss another example like a QR code. In many shops or nowadays, while doing the online payments, we are aware with the QR code. Every QR code having the different structure. That means once you will try to scan it, then you are able to also observe the name of the owner, so that you can verify the name with that scanning of the QR code, and then only you can pay the money. So this is also what? Much more security provided for the transmission of the message. So in this way, there are few things which are very unique, which are very individual, and which require the higher security, and for that purpose we have to use the cryptography. The next one is hashing. Hashing is a kind of cryptographic science that involves the conversion of data in a manner that is very impossible to invert it. This plays a very important role. That means encryption is possible, but decryption is never possible. This is known as one-way communication. So it does not require any key. Private key and public key are required for the encryption as well as decryption purpose. That means when the communication is two-way, we require the private or the public keys. Here the communication is one way, and hence it is very next to impossible to invert the given data. This is mainly done when one is storing the data in some storage device, so that an individual who gains access to it cannot change it or cause some alteration. Now, such kind of applications are used to store the data, not to modify the data. Why? Because once we are able to invert the data, we are also able to modify the data if you are the authorized receiver. But here, though the receiver is authorized, he is not able to invert or edit or modify the data. And hence such kind of security is used for the storage purpose. That means something will be stored, and that storage thing we can access for our use, but we are not able to change it or modify it. So these are nothing but what? Some things which are very useful for the cryptography. And this we can use with the help of asymmetric cryptography also. That means there are few types of the cryptography, and we are now try to focus on the asymmetric key cryptography. Why we are moving for the asymmetric key cryptography? Because in the symmetric key cryptography, only one key we can use at a time. That means sender and receiver both required to use the same key, and that should get exchanged over the transmission. And in this transmission, it may be possible that the key can get hacked by the unauthorized person, and so that transmission become more dangerous. While in the asymmetric key cryptography, there is a possibility to exchange the key, and that key is public key, and one key is used for the decryption purpose, which is known as private key. That means both sender and receiver can use the keys. So there are multiple keys, and so that there is no need to exchange the key at the time of the transmission, and hence such kind of transmission is very secure. And so that for the data which required to send much more securely, like a digital signature standard, so for that purpose we have to go to study asymmetric key cryptography. Thank you.